the page numbers that's provided online on the platform, our platform, and see if it's much different to the 6th edition. If there's changes, I will post which pages you should refer to if you have the 6th edition. Otherwise, if there's nothing posted, just assume it's the same. All right. I'll let everyone know about that. Okay, I'm just going to stop the transcription, but I'll keep the recording. Sharing. Okay, I'm going to go back to the whiteboard. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to use blue to do my writing. All right, so what you will be given is typically these columns here, what I'm highlighting up to there. All right, and I'll explain what that data is now. If you look at, let's just look at soap on the left, okay? All these items, soap, deodorant, toothpaste, these are just 3 items, specifically toiletry items that we're using to calculate index numbers for. All right, so here it is specified that the base year is 2010. You will always be told what the base year is, okay? It'll be never left for you to guess what it is, okay? The base year has to be specified. So here in this case, the base year is 2010. In that first column after the toiletry items, it's P0. And what that naught just means, it just means the 0 means it's the base period. All right, so that's the price in the base period for soap, which is 195. And for deodorant, it's 1465. And toothpaste, 629. Okay, the Q0, as I said, the naught just represents the base year. So the Q is the quantity of that item. So soap, 37 items typically sold, and deodorant is 24, and toothpaste is 14. All right. Now let's move on to the current year, which is 2018. Now we are going to compare 2018 to 2010. All right. And the price for the items of soap in 2018, represented by P1, is 210. For toothpaste, it's 674. Okay, so you kind of get in the idea. And lastly, you have Q1. That just means that's the quantity for those same items, but in 2018. All right. Now those columns are given to you. That data is given to you. These columns on the right, we won't worry about them right now. I wrote them there because they are going to be, you have to calculate them, and I'll walk you through how to calculate them for now. All right, so don't stress about it. What I recommend you do immediately when you get this table is to calculate the totals going down the rows. So for instance, this total here, this 22 and 89, all you're doing is you adding the price of soap, which is 195, the price of deodorant, which is 1465, and toothpaste, which is 629. You add those items up, those 3 items, and you'll get 22 and 89. You do the same thing for the next column. Add 37 to 24 to 14, and you'll get 75. That's how you get the totals. And you do that for these 4 columns. Add these, you'll get 24 and 79, and add these, you'll get 74 and. Okay, that's how you get the totals. So you'll need to calculate that. You will need them, so please do that. All right, now I'll talk you through some typical kind of questions that you can be expected, you'll be asked. All right, so the first question is, what is the price relative? And I'll explain what this means. What is the price relative of soap? Okay, so what that just means is, what is the price of soap in the current year relative to the base year? And that means you look at the price of soap in the current year, and that's P1. Okay, so we're looking at the price of soap in the current year, which is P1, right, which is 210. And we want to compare that to what it was in the base year. So we divide it by P0. That's how we check off when we want to compare something relative to another period, we divide it. And then we multiply it by 100%. So in our example, the price of soap in the current year, the P1 in the numerator, is 2 Rand 10 cents. And in the denominator, the P0 is 1 Rand 95. And we multiply that by 100%. All right, and we do that, you get a value of 107.69%. And you're welcome to do these calculations along with me with your calculator, right? Now, we're not done yet because we worked out the price relative of soap, right? Now, always add this extra information in. Even if you're not asked for it, what you need to just include is how much has it changed by, okay? So what has the price of soap changed from 2010 to 2018? And how you get that change is you take you take the index number that you just calculated, okay, which is 107.69%, and you subtract 100% from it. And that will give you 7.69%. That is the change, okay? So that is the percentage change. Right, and then how you'd interpret it in terms of words, and you need to write this down because you get marked for it, okay? So I know it seems like maybe a bit too much, but you are awarded the marks for it, so you need to write the statement. So remember what we are working on. We are working out the price relative of soap. So you will state the price of soap increased. And why do we say it increased? Well, you got a positive number here, okay? You got 107.69%, which is bigger than 100%, all right? You got a positive number. So whenever you have a positive number, that means it increased. So the price of soap increased by 7.69% from 2010 to 2018. That's it. You've answered that question completely. All right. So you worked out the price relative of soap, which is 107.69%. You then worked out the percentage change, and then you interpreted your answer. Yeah, that's your interpretation. Right, you need to complete all those steps if you are asked a question like that. Okay, all right. In a very, very similar way, we can be asked to calculate the quantity relative of deodorant. So the next question is, let's put a line here. Oh. All right, next question is, what is the quantity relative of, let's say, deodorant? Okay, so now we are looking at quantity and we're looking at deodorant. So as before soap, we always look at the change relative to the base year. That means the base period will be in your denominator. But now we're not talking about price, we're talking about quantity. So it'll be the Q's that we are interested in. So it's going to be, what is the Q, the quantity in the current year, which is Q1, relative to the base year, and you multiply that by 100%. And we're going to do this for deodorant. All right, so for deodorant, the quantity for deodorant in the current year, or Q1, is 18. So it's 18 divided by the base quantity for deodorant, which is 24 times 100%. Okay, we'll work that out and we'll get a value of 75%. Now we can immediately see that this value is less than 100%. So that's going to be a decrease. But let's just be certain. We work out the change by taking the quantity index, which is 75%, and we subtract 100%. And that gives you minus 25%. So we know that's a decrease because we can see it's a minus. So lastly, we'll just interpret this. So remember, we are talking about quantity. So the quantity of deodorant decreased by 25% from, oops, sorry, hopefully it'll come back. 25% from 2010 to 2018. All right. Hopefully it's making sense. Let me just check the chat if there's any questions. Feel free to just interrupt me and ask any questions, okay? If something is not making sense, please, I encourage questions. Should we always round up? Yes, Denio, 2 decimals, yeah. Make it a habit for at least 2 decimals. When we start getting to other learning units, there's going to be more decimals involved, but I will tell you when we get there. But for now, just assume that it's always 2 decimals. All right. Okay. So far, what we've done is we've done price relatives and we've done quantity relatives. So these are examples of simple indices. Why simple? And it's not so much because of the calculation being simple, it's more because you've only looked at one item at a time. So that means for the first question, we only looked at soap in isolation. For the second one, we only looked at deodorant in isolation. Now remember when I started off and I explained the consumer price index, CPI, that isn't just one item. That is a basket of goods. Okay, so it's, you know, typical toiletry items, food, etc. So you're looking at a basket of goods. So it's not a simple index, okay, because we have more than one item. And that is an example of a composite index. And that's what we're going to deal with now. Composite index looks at all the items in the basket collectively. All right, so I'm going to just clear this and make some space on the board. Okay, cool. All right. Now, there's 2 ways of calculating the composite index, right? There's the Lasperase method. And then there's the Bosch method. Right. These are composite indices, and they are specifically weighted indices. And I'll explain what weighted means in a second. These are weighted indices. And they look at all items collectively together. They don't look at them in isolation. All right. So when I said weighted indices, let me explain that via an example. So let's say you were asked, what is the Lasperase price index for these toiletry items? Okay. Now the question asks for the price index. Okay. However, what we need to do is we need to take quantity into the calculation and we use it as a weight. Now, what we mean by weight is you see, we don't want, or we want the baskets to be representative of the quantity. So let's say, for hypothetically, right, soap, I only had, let's say hypothetically, I only had 2 items here. So it's a very small amount of quantities. So when I'm working out the price indices, and then that means I'll only be looking at this column here, right? If I'm looking at the price index. If I had to work this out, what could happen is that I could have soap influencing the price significantly, even though the quantity is small, and I don't want that. Okay, if you could have like say you had a television. Oops, sorry. Hold on. Okay, just if I lost you, just let me know. Okay, so my screen was, I was talking for so long, and then my screen was about to sleep. Okay, just give me a second. Right? I'm just going to plug this in so it doesn't do that. Plug my. Okay, we're back. All right. So what I was saying is, let's say we had another item. Say it wasn't 22 items, but let's say I had television in here, TV. Now, typically a household, let's assume a household doesn't have more than 1 television. They would have 1, but that price of the television will be extremely large, right? And let's say it's 5,000. I'm making up a number here.
Sir,
Hi. Yep.
I can't see the screen on my side.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Let me
Okay,
just
thank you.
stop sharing. Thank you. Okay, stop sharing when I'm into sleep mode. Okay, just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Cool. All right, let's get back here. Okay, so what I was saying is, let's say I added television into these items, and as we know, the price of a TV is significantly larger than these items, right? So let's say it's 10,000, but you'd only have like 1 of it in your house. And what we want is we want the quantity to also be accommodated for. We want that to be taken into account because we only have 1 item, so it should be associated with the quantity that you have in your house, which is why when we look at these weighted indices, even though we're looking at the price index, okay, even though we're looking at just the price index, we will take quantity into account to weight the items. Okay, so that's why the formula for this, and don't be afraid by this formula because it is given to you. So I'm going to write it here. It's in your formula sheet. The formula is sum, okay, P1 times Q naught divided by sum P naught times Q naught times 100%. Okay, so don't worry about memorizing this formula. It's given to you. We just need to know how to use it. I'm just going to check the chat if there's any questions. Cool. Okay, I'll come back to those questions at the end. Okay. All right. Now, to work this out, that's where these columns are going to come in now. So I'm going to mark these columns if you know which one I'm talking about. I'm going to show it in green. So it's these columns here. Okay, they're not given to you. You have to work them out. Okay. So what those columns basically are, they're just products or multiplication of your price and your quantity. All right, so let's look at the first column I have here. This first one that I've created, P1 Q naught. What that means is P1 Q naught is just P1 times Q naught. All right, that's what it is. So that means everything in the P1 column, which is here, I'm going to multiply that by everything in this column, Q0. So for instance, the first P1 value is 2 Rand 10 cents times the first Q0 value is 37. Right? There. All right, if I do that, I will get this first value here. Okay, it's as simple as that. I'll do it for the next item as well. So now we remember we're doing P1 times Q0. Okay, so P1, right? The next row is 15 Rand 95 times the respective Q0 in that row, which is 24. If I do that, I will get this value here, 382.8. And I do that for every row, okay? Multiply P1 times Q0. In the exact same way, I'm going to do the same thing for P0, Q0. So now, let me just clear up this, I want to make it too busy. Oops. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay, let's get back to that. Question? Okay, all right. So now we're going to do this column, P0, Q0. Right, so now we look at the P0 column, which is here, and we look at the Q0 column here. Right, so we're going to multiply these two columns. So the first value is 1 Rand, so the P0, Q0. So it's going to be 195 times 37, because that's the value in your Q0 column. You do that, and you'll get this value here, 72 Rand 95. And you just continue in that fashion all the way to the last row, which is 6 Rand 29 times 14, and that will give you the last value here. Okay, so if you understand how I did it for those first two columns, you kind of get the idea. That's how you do for the remaining two columns. This will be the P1 column times the Q1 column, and then lastly, it's the P0 times the Q1. So how you know which columns to multiply? Remember, you have P0, which needs to be paired with the different quantities. You'll always have a price paired with a quantity. All right, and you have P0 and you have P1. Right, so P0 you need to multiply by Q0, and then you'd also have P0 multiplied by Q1. In the same way, you'll have P1 times Q0, and then you'll have P1 times Q1. So just think of every P and Q pairs. All right, you'll have 4 of them. That's why you have 4 columns. Okay, does that make sense? Remember, your P's only pair with Q's. If you look at the formula, what's required, the formula has P times Q in the top, and you have P and Q in the bottom, right? But it's just different periods. That's what the small in the subscript represents. The naught represents the base year, as I said in the beginning, and the 1 represents the current year. So you create those 4 columns. Someone's unmuting, so I'm just checking if there's a question. No. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Please. If you have a question, unmute and please ask away. But otherwise, just maybe keep your mic on mute. Okay. So that's why I got these 4 columns, and everyone understands how to get the values in those columns. All right. So if anything is unclear, let me know. Does anyone want me to go through that again? I'm just checking in the chat. All good. It's pretty systematic. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, once you've got those 4 columns, I'm going to do the same thing that I did for these values. I got the totals. So all you do is you add up the values going down. So you add up 77.70, 382.80, and then you add up this last one, 94.36, and that's how you get this total here, 554.86. You do the same thing for the next row, sorry, the next column, and then the next column and the last column. You add up the values and you get the totals in the bottom. And now we are going to use these totals in the formula. Now let's try and understand what this formula is really asking for. If you look at this formula here, let's look at just the numerator, the value in the top here. That value in the top is asking for sum, that's what the sigma represents, P1 times Q naught. Now, if you look at the columns that you calculated here, right, you have a column that has P1 Q naught. There it is right there. You have that column, okay? And you have the total of that column. So that, in other words, you have your sigma. That's what the sigma represents, sum. You've already summed it up. So that entire numerator in this formula, you've already worked it out already. It's this value here. So that is equal to 554.86. All right, does that make sense? Everyone, any questions on this? Please let me know. Thanks, I really appreciate the feedback. Okay, but if there's anything you want me to go back and explain, please let me know. Now, in the same way, so okay, I'm going to check if you're following, right? I showed you how to get the numerator. Now let's look at the denominator. What value do you think represents the denominator? Can you write that in the chat? So I'm looking for this value here, sum P naught times Q naught. What is that value? I've done it here on the table. It's one of these three values here. Which value is it? Can you write it in the chat? Excellent. That's right. It's 511.81. Exactly. You're looking for the P naught Q naught column, which is this column, and the total is very good. Nice work. That's the total. 0.81. So now we have all the values to plug into this formula. We've done all the hard work. Let's plug in the values. So we're going to take these two numbers, we're going to divide it by each other and multiply by 100%. And if you do that, you get a value of, I'll write it down, it's 108.41%. 108.41%. And we know it's greater than 100, so it's indicating an increase. Okay, so that's our index. Now let's check the change. How we check the change? We subtract 100% from it. So the change is 108.41% minus 100%, and that gives me 8.41% increase. All right, now we need to interpret this. Okay, so the interpretation for this is a little bit more detailed. It's not too hectic. Okay, let me just explain something before we start the interpretation. I want you to look at this formula, and I'm just going to use green here to kind of draw your attention to it, okay? Okay, if you look at this formula, you'll see in the numerator, you have Q naught, and in the bottom, you also have Q naught. So you got the same quantity in the numerator and the denominator. So what that means is that you've kept the quantity in the base here, because remember Q naught is the quantity in the base here. Q naught, right? You've kept the quantity in the base here constant because you can see Q naught is both in the numerator and the denominator. That's what we're using as the weight. So our interpretation will always start off with, what are we keeping constant, right? We need to say that in our interpretation. So how we start that is, we will say holding the quantity, I'm just going to write QTY as a short form, okay? Quantity in 2010 constant. Now I will talk about the change. The price of a basket of toiletry items, because remember, we are dealing with a composite index. That means it's the entire basket. We're not looking at one item. So the price of toiletry items increased by 8.41%. By 8.41% from 2010 to 2018. Please answer the question exactly like how I wrote it. You can change the wordings, but there's things you must have in your explanation. You need to show what you're keeping constant. All right. You need to show whether it increased or decreased. You need to say how much it increased and decreased by, and from what period to what period did it change. I've seen students say from base year to current. Okay. And you will get marked down for that. You can't just leave it at base and current. It's general. You need to show that you know how to interpret the data that's given to you. All right. This can be applied for anything, but you need to answer it specifically for this problem. So you need to specify what the base year is, which is 2010, and you must specify what the current period is. Okay, please make a note of that and remember that. Okay, when you're doing your assignment and when you're doing writing your exam, remember that detail. Okay, so now I've shown you how to do the last price index, and the Posh price index is pretty much the same thing. If you understood this, the Posh price index is very, very similar. There's just one change to the formula. Okay, so let me clear this. Before I continue, let me check if there's any questions. Good. All right. Okay, cool. Let's get back to it. All right, so now the question is, calculate the Posh price index and interpret it. Okay, now the formula for that is this. It's sum, okay, P1Q1 all upon sum P0Q1 times 100%. Now, the only difference between the formula we did earlier and now is before this was Q0 on the top and it was Q0 on the bottom. But now it's Q1 and Q1. So in other words, you're keeping the quantity in the current year constant. That's the difference. All right. Now, we've done all the hard work here because we've got these totals. If you look at the numerator, okay, P1, Q1, if you look at this, we already have that here. And the total of that is 478.94. So 478.94. And the denominator is this, P0 Q1. Yeah. And that total is 442.34. 0.34. And multiply that by 100%. Okay. And if you work that out, you'll get a value of 108.27%. 0.27%. That's the index. Right, now let's work out the change. Change is 108.27% minus 100%, which is 8.27%. Now I know some of you might be thinking, the change might just seem too obvious for you. Whenever you get a value that's over 100, you can just easily read off that change, 8.27%. And you're perfectly fine to do that. Okay, if it saves you time and it's easier for you, do it that way. There's a reason why I always suggest doing it this way and keeping it like systematic, because sometimes you may not get such a great number like this, or lack of a better word, pretty number. You might get a value like 82.17%. You might get that. Now, for me, I can't spot the exact change right away. If I try and do it mentally in my mind, I might mess up, especially in an exam. Okay, when I'm stressed and I'm trying to work it out. It's left to you if you want to work out the change mentally instead of subtracting 100. But this is why I always suggest just subtract 100 and do it in your calculator. That'll give you the exact change that you're looking for. Okay, so it's up to you. But just know that that is why I always suggest just subtracting the 100 and getting the change. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, now in this example, we got an index of 108.27. So the change, which we just worked out, is 8.27%. Right, now let's interpret this answer. We always start off with saying what we are keeping constant. If you look at the formula, we have Q1 in the top and we have Q1 in the bottom. So that means we're keeping the quantity in the current year constant. So we would start off by saying holding the quantity in 2018 constant, right? The price, because that's the index we're working at the price index, the price of toiletry items increased, because we've got a positive number here, by 8.27% from 2010 to 2018. That's it. A typical question like this, like what we just did, can carry 5 or 6 marks, right? If you answered it pretty much like how I showed you here. If you've done the workings like how I told you to earlier here, you can quickly just pull it into this here, into this calculation. All right. This tends to be what do you call it? Less prone to making a mistake if you follow this method. But I leave it to you to find what works for you. But either way, this is essentially what you need to calculate and how you need to interpret it. Okay, let me just check the chat if there's any questions. For price relative, do we always say keeping the price of? So, Daniel, whenever you're working with the Lasperis and Posh composite indices, then yes, you must say what you're keeping constant, right? But for simple price relatives and simple quantity relatives, you don't specify that. Okay, does it make sense? So I'm gonna have. Sure, Shakira, no problem. The recording will be made available. You can just catch up on the rest of that. I'd like to know where the assignment 1 addendum has been uploaded. Marius, I don't know specifically. Let me, I'll follow up. Should be on the student portal. I'm assuming it's where you'd find your pairs and your assignment, but let me just double check, okay? If I hear any information on that, I will get back to you. Or just drop me an email as well, just so I can follow up as a reminder, please. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, all right. So the last thing I want to do is work out the Lasperis quantity index. Okay, now I know this is probably the let me say trickiest one, and it had to be done last. Sorry, but I have to do it anyway. So it's not complicated. All right, so just follow with me. I'll take you through this every step of the way, and you just let me know if anything is not clear. So I'm just going to erase everything. Okay, so far, what we did is we did the Lasperis price index, and that formula is given to you. The Lasperis price index. So I told you that formula is given to you, so don't worry about memorizing it. So that is the sum of P1 times Q naught all over the sum of P naught times Q naught times 100%. Okay, all right. So that's for the last price index. What I emphasized earlier is that if you look at your Qs, they're the same. That means we're looking at the base year when keeping the quantity constant. Quantity constant. But you can get asked to work out the last Perez quantity index. Now, this formula is not given to you. You have to derive it, but you can derive it looking at the price index formula. Okay, so let me walk you through this formula, and you can easily adapt it to get the quantity index. So if you look at the price index, right, this formula here that I'm drawing your attention to, whenever you're working out a price index, you need to look at the price in the current year and the price in the base year. All right, so you look at P1 and P0. They have to be different because that's how you detect the change. In this formula, you're looking for the price index. So you want to know how the price has changed. So you look at the price in the current year divided by the price in the base year, right? So relative to the base year. So in the same way, if I want to determine what is the quantity index, then I need to look at, in the numerator, the quantity in the current year relative to the quantity in the base year, if I want to know how quantity has changed. Okay, let me just repeat that. For the price index, you have to vary the price. They can't be the same in the top and the bottom. You want to see how the price in the current year change with respect to the price in the base year. In that same principle, if I want to see how quantity has changed, then I need to look at the quantity in the current year relative to the quantity in the base year. Now, I have quantity that's changed, but I need to keep the price constant this time because that's going to be my weight. So I need to keep the price constant. But which price do I keep constant? Is it going to be P1 that I keep in both the top and the bottom? Or is it going to be P0 that I keep in the top and the bottom? Now that's where you look at this formula here. And we are dealing with the last price formula. If you look at the top for the quantity, you are keeping the base year constant. Whenever you're dealing with the last price, you're keeping the base year constant. That's why you have Q0 and Q0. So if you are dealing with last price again, and you need to know which price to keep constant, it's going to be the base year. That's why it's last price. So it's going to be P0. That's the formula. That's it. You derive the formula. Okay, times 100%. So it's one important thing I could tell you to take away. Just remember that last Perez keeps base year constant. Period constant. And Posh keeps the current year constant. All right. Did I lose anyone on that? Okay. Okay, cool. All right, perfect. So I'll work this out and I'll interpret it for you. Okay. So let me just clear this last part out. Hang in there, people. I'm almost done. All right. So now we've establish the formula, all we need to do is substitute the values. Now this is Q1 P naught. And remember, multiplication, Q1 times P naught is the same thing as P naught times Q1. We just rearrange them. So if you look at the columns that I have on top, I'm looking for P naught Q1, and I have that here. So that's my numerator. That's that. So the numerator is 442.34. The denominator is, it's Q naught times P naught. It's the same thing as here. Even if you swap them around, it's the same thing. So the denominator is 511.81. You multiply that by 100%, and you get a value of 86.43%. So this is one of those examples where the number isn't very pretty. It's less than 100, and I need to work out the difference. So the change is 86.43% minus 100%. And that gives you minus 13.57%. All right, now let's interpret it. Okay, so remember, we start off with saying what we're keeping constant. And if you look at the formula, the P naught is the same. We're keeping the price and the base year constant. So holding the price and the base year is 2010. So we won't just say base year, we need to say what year that is. In 2010 constant. The quantity, remember now we worked out quantity, so don't say price because we worked out the quantity index. So the quantity of toiletry items decreased. Why? Because you got a negative value. Decreased by 13.57% from 2010 to 2018. That's it. That's your 6 marks right there. Okay. Okay, I hope that makes sense. As an exercise, I would like you to work out the POSH. I'll write the answer so you can just walk towards it. I'd like you to work at the POSH quantity index. I'd like you to work that out as an exercise, okay? And the answer you should work towards is 86.32%. Okay, remember to get the change and interpret it. Okay, so this is your exercise. Please give it a shot. And if you get a chance. Okay. That's all for me this evening, everyone. The floor is yours. Any questions? Everyone happy? Everyone feeling positive about this course? I hope you are, but please let me know if you.
Hi, Daryl. I have a quick question.
Go for it.
So regarding the totals columns, do we always have to total each product, or can we just do the P1, Q1 totals and so forth?
Yeah, so you could skip this. I know we never use it here, but sometimes they could ask you to work out the composite index, the unweighted composite index for toiletry items. For, let's say the question would be the unweighted composite index for toiletry items. Composite price. Sorry, I missed the word price for toiletry items.
Sorry, Daryl, are you sharing a screen that we're supposed to look at?
Yeah, I am. I shouldn't.
Oh, there, I see it now.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, let me erase this and start again. So So sometimes, this is not common, but let's not bank on it. Sometimes you could get asked, what is the composite unweighted price index for toiletry items? Okay, now unweighted means you don't take both price and quantity into account. You just look at price. And if that's the case, then you would look at the total, because composite means everything, not a single item. So it would be the total price, which is 24 in the current year, divided by the price in the base year, 0.89 times 100%. And then work it out and interpret it. It's a good question you asked. If I could give you an advice, maybe leave these out. Don't get these totals. Don't get these totals unless read the questions and check if they asked you for composite unweighted, right? And if you see that, then get the totals. Otherwise, these are a must. You'll always be asked the weighted composite index. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else? Okay. If there aren't any questions, then everyone, thank you for joining. I hope this session helps. I will make the recording available, and yeah, I'll place it in the YouTube channel, which I'm hoping everyone has access to. Yeah, but shout if you have any issues. What if you don't, Caden, you don't get POSH unweighted. POSH and LASPERES are always weighted. Okay, there's no specific name for unweighted. Okay, just remember that POSH, LASPERES, by definition, is always a weighted index. No problem. Oh, and thank you. Have a great evening, everyone. We'll chat soon.